Great to have you guys here. Thanks for making the trip out. Congratulations on winning the award. You're in great company here at the Banff World Media Festival with Netflix and Google, disruptors just like yourselves. So it's really good to have you here. And we're going to spend the next 50 minutes getting to know the guys from Vice and getting to know Vice a little bit better, their story, from the content perspective, from the business perspective. But the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to roll a clip, and we're going to take a look at what Vice is all about. So if you can roll that clip, that'd be great.
Welcome to Vice, the world's leading youth media company. With print, online, music, events, television, and feature film divisions operating in over 30 countries, Vice is the voice of global youth culture.
Why is it that the best stories always take so long to get to?
Because all of the easy-to-get-to ones have been done by programs better than yours.
Vice.com is the hub for this global media brand, combining 18 years of Vice's influential editorial and photography and thousands of hours of original video.
We're going to Checkpoint Charlie. This is one of the most dangerous places in the world.
I know we're being followed by the police right now. Let's go, let's go, let's go, let's go, let's go, let's go.
With global in-house production capabilities, over 3,000 contributors, and dozens of series franchises, Vice has set the standard for online video. There's simply no company that creates more original premium video for the web. And the Vice network is expanding exponentially, launching a suite of video-driven online channels in partnership with the world's leading brands. With the Creators Project, Vice has built an unprecedented worldwide arts and culture channel, exploring the intersection of art and technology.
People that come to the Creators Project are ready to become really open-minded. And they look at just this moment of discovery and their minds opening up is really satisfying.
Motherboard is a celebration of the culture of technology and the characters and stories that drive science and creativity forward.
Our aspiration is to help humanity build its own actual network, not a virtual network, but an actual network.
Noisy is a new editorial brand, capturing the energy and passion of music around the world.
Welcome to Vice's new music channel. It's called Noisy.
With time on site averaging over 20 minutes and growth of over 200% in 2012, the Vice network deeply engages influential millennials like no one else.
Further expanding this engagement is AdVice, Vice's activation division. AdVice delivers premium content and high-impact campaigns through a curated partner network at scale. With Vice, AdVice, and a multitude of new channels launching across vertical categories, Vice is the way to reach and engage with influencers, authentically and globally. Welcome to Vice, the world's leading youth media company.
Hey. Nice, guys. Way to build a media empire.
Thanks, man.
So that's
I want to first apologize to everyone here who thought that they were going to hear George talk, who actually is smart and knows what he's talking about. So now they're going to have to deal with us. So apologies up front.
So this has been over the past 18 years that you guys have been building this?
We're an 18-year startup.
18 years startup. Yeah. And so out of Montreal.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about that? It was a paper magazine, was it, when it first started?
Yeah, I mean, it started as a tabloid 16-page newsprint magazine once a month.
You knew when it came out because the Montreal hipsters would all have sort of black ink faces because we had very cheap printing.
Done on government subsidies.
We don't like to talk about that.
That's good. We got a system here in Canada. Might as well use it to make great content.
We could have taken much more advantage of it than we actually did, if we had been smarter. But
we had to fill out all our forms with our left hand.
To make it seem like we were a bit challenged and needed help. We got an extra $100 on top of our welfare checks. I think I told you about that a year ago. which in Montreal you can live like a king.
Yeah.
At that time.
At that time.
At that time. But, we started the magazine, and, there were already 2 other English publications in a shrinking market. So it made absolutely no sense. But we didn't know any better, and I think it was one of those ignorance is bliss, because had we known, we probably would have thought this is
the right business venture.
Yeah,
well, they outlawed English as
That's
well,
true.
right?
That made it challenging.
It was during Parizeau and the separation, so at one point we were illegal. So that was good.
And right away, connection with the audience? Did it take time to build?
No, I mean, yeah. That was the thing is, right away, actually, Quebec wanting to separate was a big thing for us because it forced us to go to the rest of Canada. And so we did a deal with Voyageur, and we would put our magazines on it and then give them ads. I don't know if an ad ever worked for Voyageur, but all of a sudden, when we started, putting it across the country, the popularity just, grew dramatically. So that was a big wake-up call for us.
And you're like, we've got something here.
Yeah.
This can scale on a national level.
Exactly.
So how does it go from that to the international level, and then all of a sudden, maybe not all of a sudden, but growing it into this empire that it is today?
Well, we were shipping to New York and Tokyo and London already. And then
So it was through distribution through clothing stores, was it not?
Yeah.
So
we
you
came
set up a
during
network of clothing
the
stores to
streetwear
do?
revolution. And
Yeah.
so we would give magazines to the streetwear companies. And then they would send them in the boxes to the shops. And so we were all over the place. And we were actually doing really well in New York as a sort of oddity, because we were the biggest mag in Montreal, which for them is like being the biggest mag in Reykjavik. So they were like, how do these guys even know about music? And so we went down there, and the guy at the time, Richard Shawinski, was sort of the richest guy in Montreal, and he was doing the City of Multimedia in Old Montreal, and he was a sort of larger-than-life character, and we said in a newspaper that he was going to buy us. And he never heard of us, so he was like reading the newspaper, and he's like, who are these bastards?
I want to meet these guys.
I want to meet these cocky sons of bitches. And so we met him, and we did a deal with him, and he brought us down to New York, and then the rest is history.
It's pretty cool.
And I don't think that kind of thing could have happened anywhere but Montreal. It was insane. There's like Salwinski investing in Vice at the time. There's no due diligence. It was us saying, we are worth $1 million or whatever we said.
Yeah.
We said, okay, that's a lot of money. Here's the money. We're like, great.
Let's
this
do
is how
it.
you do business. Actually, that's not how you do business, but in Montreal, apparently it is. So
Yeah, there was a lot of E flying around in those days.
It was done. The deal was inked at a party.
Yeah. Well, he made me drink a bottle of Jack Daniels before we had the meeting.
To test your mettle.
Yeah, literally.
Yeah.
So I was sort of holding onto the table, sweating, going, it's $1 million.
Okay, you passed.
Yeah.
In terms of that distribution, like you saying you're putting in the streetwear, were those your advertisers? So you know, in the early days of the magazine and still in the magazine, you've got, what I heard is that you curated the ads in the magazine, so you wouldn't let advertisers that you didn't think would resonate with your audience in there.
Yes.
So that was the case.
Yeah, I mean, we famously said no to a huge check from Skechers because we were doing a lot of Nike's advanced marketing. We've said no to a lot of ads. We made a lot of ads because the ads were very ugly. So we started sort of trying to integrate, making the ads, look like the magazine, making the ads, sort of mesh more with the culture, which we still do today with our online video or with mobile or with television or anything else that we do.
And you on the business side, you collect production fees for creating those ads?
Yeah.
Cool. So it's a different revenue source that comes
Yeah.
in addition to the ad buy.
Exactly.
And then, so do you work with those advertisers in early days saying, you're advertising the magazine, distribute the magazine, here's, 100, 200 copies, so when you throw it into, when you throw your gear into store, take the magazines with them?
we actually used the barter system a lot in the early days.
Yeah.
So it wasn't just clothing companies, but it was record labels and, distributors and whatever it was. And so we would ship, however many copies to Hamilton, Ontario, and Sonic Onion Records would they'd have a quarter-page ad every month, and they would drive it around, and it worked for years, actually.
They wanted to get their ad out, so they would actually really cover the city. So for sort of a small print run, relatively, we would get a huge pass along and a huge pickup rate.
And for the clothing companies, they would sometimes pay us in clothing, or it was like a combination of distribution, some clothing, and some cash, which for us was great because being on welfare, we liked new clothes.
We'd be in Montreal just walking around.
Completely decked out in like crazy streetwear from Southern California.
Pink jumpsuit.
It's rollerblades, whatever. I think it's great because it's DIY, right? You're creating you're creating the content, but you're also creating the distribution network, and you're also creating the ads at the same time. You're doing it through barter. At this point, it's just the two of you guys doing this, or you've got other people helping you out?
We had a couple interns. We had an office manager, but it was very small. And it was, it was a community. And we were making a magazine essentially for ourselves and our friends that we wanted to read. And it happened to resonate with people in different cities. But those advertisers were also part of that community as well. They believed in what we were doing. And again, it wasn't so calculated or strategic. It was, how can we get these magazines to LA? And we would just figure it out and come up with these crazy barter deals, and got through the early days on the barter system and just enough money. It was this kind of punk rock capitalism that we can't drive debt. We can't take loans. We have to, print as many magazines based on how much we're selling, and it worked. Those lessons actually applied later after we, did something different with Solwinski and his investment. I remember when we received that investment, and it was just spending, millions of dollars to build this thing, and Shane was actually like, how does this make money? How does this work? This doesn't make any sense. But we were also like, these guys have taken companies public. They know what they're doing. They're worth X millions of dollars, so they must know.
And this is the time in New York. So you get to
It was
New
right
York.
after we moved to New York.
So you get to New York, you've got this investment, and then the strategy changes, and you're spending. You're not building on revenue. You're spending to either take it public or whatever.
It was the sort of e-commerce.com bubble.
Yeah.
And we were there
So
in New York.
98, 99, 2001.
Exactly.
And we were there, and we were taking the magazine and making an e-commerce platform. And I kept going to the shareholders meetings and saying, I don't understand how this works. And then they'd yell at me. And
they say, keep going, just keep doing what
yeah,
you're doing.
and actually we were the only one of the companies, and there was like 28 companies that actually executed on our business plan. And then they all left one day. Literally one day we showed up at the office and everyone was gone.
Yeah. So you were in kind of like a hub of
we were a huge office in Midtown, and everyone left. And so we bought the company back, and there was a lot of debt. And so we spent the next 2 years, we moved to Brooklyn, to Williamsburg, into the warehouse of a company that we were trying to buy at the time, 555 Soul. And they had pity on us and gave us a part of their warehouse. And then, but we had sort of come out of the pond and seen, there is this possibility, to sort of, go to all these countries, because, for the first time ever, kids in Shanghai and Stockholm and Sao Paulo knew the same, about music, culture, and fashion at the same time because of the internet, but no one was really the voice of that universality of youth subculture.
And when did you first spot that? Because that's a tribe phenomenon, right? So, if I'm into skateboarding or if I'm into this, it doesn't matter where I am.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm into
Well, that's how we found out. It was through skateboarding, through streetwear, through the international conventions, Magic, ASR, things like that, as well as when we were with Richard, we were looking at sort of, buying up other companies around the world and sort of making it a global enterprise. And so when they went bust, we moved to Brooklyn. And what's interesting then is we actually got there right as Williamsburg exploded. Right as all these sort of artists and the musicians and the filmmakers and the designers sort of came out of Williamsburg, we were there. And Brooklyn almost became a brand and sort of, became hot in Germany and in England, in Japan, and then we were sort of the voice of that brand.
So you're basically following the cultural developments that are going on, like you're saying, in terms of you're writing this magazine for the community, you're in New York, the community is there in Brooklyn before it gets gentrified, you're there in the midst of the community that you're publishing for.
Exactly.
And then, so how does
People think that we moved to Williamsburg because we thought it was cool, but the reality is that we didn't have a choice. We couldn't afford to stay.
Rent was cheap.
At that time, Williamsburg was a wasteland as well. It was amazing. It was like this zero accountability. Like it was very decadent at that like kind of post 9/11 era economic collapse, and we were there. It was part of this kind of zeitgeist, and like Shane was saying, our friends were in these bands that all started blowing up, the Yeah Yeah Yeahs and the Rapture and all these, you know, like it was a great kind of moment in culture and time in New York City.
Yeah.
To be part of that.
It was, we used to get shaken down by crackheads though.
Larry,
Crazy Larry would defecate on our stoop unless we paid him $1 a day.
And all you had to do is go bankrupt to get there.
That's it.
So, and then how does it go international? Because you're in, what, 18 different countries now?
34.
34 now.
34 different countries. So how does it go international? You move to Brooklyn and then goes international from there? You get...
Well, we went to Japan and England first, but then...
Australia.
What happened was we realized when we were getting bigger in the States that we could, go after Rolling Stone or Spin and sort of water everything down. Or we could go after the sort of 150, what were then called hipsters, now fire starters, early adopters, whatever you want to call them, 150,000 in the UK, 100,000 in Germany, And so we said, well, we'll rather just go after the people that like us, the sort of post-MTV generation, and we'll go after them rather than try to do 1 million copies here. And so now we're at 1.5 million copies globally, but it's sort of, the cool kids.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And how does that, in terms of the international partnerships, how does that work? You start buying different companies, or people are approaching you, or?
We had no money, so we couldn't buy anything.
Yeah.
We would go and we would do, again, a system where we would go to other local publishers or people who we thought would be good publishers, and we'd say, okay, we'll give you a certain percentage of ownership, and then we'll hire the editorial team, you'll give us an office, you'll pay for the first 10 print runs. And then as time went by, we'd either buy them out or they'd sort of invest more. And then when we got more and more money, when we became really profitable, we just started buying out the actual individual publishing entities, but we kept the editorial.
A lot of it was them finding us. People would approach us and say, I'm in Australia, I'm a big fan of what you're doing. There's room in the marketplace for Vice. Mm-hmm. And so we weren't that sophisticated necessarily about who we were choosing with. We were just like, oh, these people really get what we're doing, and it was exciting to us to launch in Japan. Mm-hmm. So we would set it up and go, but that was obviously the internet, mm-hmm. Hard at work at that time, and getting it out there. And so and instead of trying to go big in America and break through and become this kind of successful mainstream thing, where we would always say we'd have to put the Chili Peppers on the cover, something we would never do, we're getting to our audience and doing this lateral expansion, and it just kind of grew from there, and next thing you know, it's a global thing. And what's also interesting is that free model of publishing for the magazine was something that was very foreign in countries like Germany or the UK, where if it's free, it must be shit. And that was the idea. And so
when you say free, you mean free to consumer?
Free distribution magazine, like it's not on the newsstand. And we were always saying, well, it's actually, we have 100% pickup rate, the model can, it works. And what ended up happening was that Vice became the biggest lifestyle magazine in the UK, and all of those other, The Face and Dazed and Confused and ID, which we recently acquired, we became bigger than them. So it was interesting, this kind of free model.
And using that same distribution model in the different countries, you'd have your publishing partners and you'd say, hey guys, look, work with the advertisers to get it through, like we did in
Montreal. Advertisers would call the stores and say, hey, because they had ads in the mag, and they would say, hey, push the mag because, or take the mag because we want to support our brand that's in the store. And then the stores would have kids coming in saying, hey, when's the new Vice, when's the new Vice? So they realized it brought a lot of traffic, so then everyone started fighting for the mag. And when we would put it down initially, it would be 2 weeks, it would go in, and then it would be 2 days, and then it would be 2 hours. So like the minute we put it down, it would be gone.
So and when does it go internet? When do you launch? Because one of the, I guess the big moments is when you launch VBS.TV. So it's less of a print mag at that point and more of a site where you're monetizing traffic on the site.
Well, that was the big change,
Yeah, I mean, I think the first with Solwinski was the first kind of internet play that we did, a big, fancy e-commerce website that we built. It was too early. And people didn't have, the pipeline didn't really
And you're
exist.
selling gear for
We were
advertisers
selling gear and it was like a big kind of, store online where we're fulfilling around the world in 24 hours, selling everything from art to music to books to clothing.
So more of an e-commerce play than a content play.
Yeah, but so that went away.
Yeah.
And then in 2005, when we picked up cameras and did the Vice Guide to Travel DVD, that was, I think, the big kind of shift.
Yep. We did a DVD that was us very publicly going to production school. It was bad, but
people liked it though.
But people loved it, and just like the stories. And Spike Jones, who's our creative director, said, "Hey, you guys shoot all your stories in the magazine, right?" And we said, "Yeah, of course." And then we went back to the office and said, "Okay, how do we do that?" Because we weren't. And so we bought some cameras and Final Cut Pro and just sort of, I don't know. And it was funny because in the beginning we were magazine guys, which is just write about it afterwards. And so something, the bomb would go off and we'd be like, "Wow, that was awesome. Did anyone get that?" And like no one would have pressed record kind of. So.
And it was the two of you guys producing the content. So there's the original
Vice
Guide.
It was a lot of us, and Eddie was in the mix at that point as well.
Yeah, there was a lot of people, but what happened was, Suroosh did Heavy Metal in Baghdad, which, at the time, online content was synonymous with shit, and then there was TV, which was less shit, and then there was like, the holy grail of film. And, he did the first thing, and it was online, and our editor said, "Hey, you can make a feature out of this." And we said, "Okay," and it cost us 25 grand. So, and then it went on to Toronto Film Festival, which it won Critics' Choice. It won Berlin Film Festival for Doc, for Panorama, and then it went on to 84 different film festivals, got picked up by the BBC, got picked up by everybody. And we're like, oh, that's what we'll do then. We'll just make online content that doesn't suck. And, Spike helped us out a lot. And, that's
in terms of guerrilla style filming or
storytelling.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's a great storyteller. And he helped. Now we're opening a big campus in LA where Spike and a couple of our other senior editors actually teach, because we do a lot of things where we get shooters and cutters right out of tech school. We go to the deans and say, give us your top student. They like it because they get their kids jobs. We like it because we get their best talent. And then Spike or Bernardo or any of our top guys, Bernardo who cut Heavy Metal in Baghdad, will then run them through a school of, how we shoot, how we cut, because we do that. We do everything in a completely different way.
Cool. And so you don't work with other producers. You're producing all your content.
Everything in-house.
In-house. And you're using this system of training. Is this recent, the training system, or how did it actually evolve?
No, we've been doing it since we started. We didn't have money to hire anybody else, nor did we want to, because once people have done commercials, especially, where you're paid, it was a $5 million budget to do 30 seconds, or TV, they kind of get ruined, because we shoot so much and we cut so much that we can't have someone coming from the commercial world or from the TV. So we were just getting students out, and then we would train them in the way that we sort of do things.
We would see these crews from like MTV, for example, that would come to do a piece about us or one of our bands or whatever, and I was like, there are so many people. Why are there so many people to film a very simple sit-down interview? This makes no sense. So again, it was like trying to make content for cheap and do it well, but be lean and have it not suck. I mean, I think that was the big thing. When people started putting video content online, they all thought it would be cheaper and easier, and it's actually expensive, and it still has to be of a certain quality, because the consumer doesn't want to watch garbage, right? And I think that's what's kind of like changed things as far as video online goes. It's got to be, which is why you see what Netflix is doing and putting House of Cards up or whatever it is. It's got to be good quality, and that's what has been our primary focus. Is just it's got to be good.
And in terms of what are you guys? Are you guys a news network?
Oh, we're an entertainment network. Everyone always asks us, what is Vice? And, look, we do magazines, we do books, we do music, we do online, we do TV, we do film. We're just a media company like any other media company. We do all that stuff. We're in 34 countries. We're just younger and weirder. So people are like, you guys are, what is it? Well, it's a media company. We just make media. And our primary focus is online and mobile. But, you know, we do TV in 24 different countries. You know, we have an HBO series in the States and here in Canada. And, you know, we do a lot of film work now. You know, we have, I believe, 4 films in distribution right now. So, you know, we're a media company.
But it is reporting from crazy places.
Sure. Well, we do a lot of news stuff. News is, our audience has sort of forced us into news because we always say, look, if Vice is a news source, you're fucked because we're kind of an, you know, as we've said here, like we came from, you know, being a Montreal sort of style mag. But as we grew around the world, we started seeing more environmental problems, political problems. You know, obviously young people, you know, Europe's on fire. You know, if the Gulf War made CNN, the current economic crisis made Vice. And so we became the sort of voice of this rage, and no one was really reporting on it. No one was embedding with the anarchists in Greece. They were embedding with, you know, the Marines and wherever. So, you know, that's when our growth became exponential. And, you know, we
in terms of, and when you say growth, you mean in views online? Is that how you would measure that growth?
Well, there's a lot of, I mean,
everything though.
Yeah,
you know, growth, the amount of content we're producing, the number of offices, number of employees, just growth overall.
Scale.
Doubling the production output or tripling or whatever it is, you know. Over the last 3 years, we probably increased our volume of content output 5 to 10, a multiple of 5 to 10 times, I think, you know.
And obviously scale, our YouTube channels were very successful for us. That was a massive amount of scale. With our Advice network, we were now, you know, sort of getting 220 million uniques a month, which is, you know, staggering numbers. And, you know, online, mobile, you know, we're doing a lot in India, television. So if you sort of started cuming it all together, this little tiny magazine from Montreal, you know, that used to be, you know, 20,000 copies, is now doing in the hundreds of millions. And so that really started, I guess, 2 or 3 years ago. And then the sort of revenue, you know, came along with it. And now, you know, because news was our big success, like when we were on YouTube, you know, our time on site was 24 to 28 minutes, depending on the month, which they've never seen numbers like that. They're generally sub 2 minutes if they're lucky. We were one of the fastest sub drivers in the history of YouTube, best video completion rate, best like versus dislike ratio, all these things. And it just scaled up so quickly. And we realized it was all the news content. It was all the news stuff that they were consuming as longer format. And so then came the HBO show, which is more of a news magazine.
So you use those stats on YouTube to be able to talk with HBO and say, look.
No, we just were making more and more content. We said, oh, this is, you know, people are really loving this stuff. Let's make more. We like making it. And then we showed HBO some of the stuff. Actually, the real story is there was a big US network who wanted to give us a news magazine show. And we said no. Well, we said yes, actually. And then Ari Emanuel, our agent, said, look, you can't, I know you guys, you can't do anything on a major network. Not that HBO is a major network, but you know, not a cable network. And you know, HBO will let you do what you want to do. They'll give you total creative control. They'll let you swear, which is good because I swear like a sailor on shore leave. And so they said, you know, so we went to HBO, and it's interesting because HBO is sort of the gold standard of television, and you know, wins more awards than any other, you know, network combined, or all the other networks combined. And then for us to sort of go on HBO and do well was a sort of validation that, okay, like when we started, when we said we're going to make great stuff online, it's the same stuff that we make online. So to be on TV and have that, it was a validation for us. And so much so that now we're launching a 24-hour news channel in conjunction with YouTube and Google in 18 countries and 18 languages simultaneously in the fall. And that's been our biggest focus.
So we have an HBO clip, right? Did you want to?
Well, I was just going to say, you know, the reel that we showed kind of touches on it, but to your question, the .com side of Vice is a network. You know, we have Vice.com, but then there's Noisy for music, Creators Project for arts, Motherboard for tech, Fightland with MMA. We have a new EDM vertical called Thump, and then news will be what we're launching soon, which Shane's talking about with YouTube and Google, and that's the news channel, and that has helped define the brand and, you know, driven a lot of our growth.
So you guys, you know, they say you're the next MTV. Is that correct? Would you say that assumption
Well,
is correct? You've got multiple verticals in there. Because I've heard, you guys are either the next CNN or the next MTV.
I think Noisy is the next MTV.
Yeah, Noisy.
Our music play.
Yeah.
I think Vice overall is, I think our news vertical, you could say, will be the next CNN. And I think So
there's aspirations to be both.
And I think people are ready to get their news from different people in a different way, and the HBO show is testament to that.
I've gone on record and say I want to be the next MTV, I want to be the next CNN and the next ESPN, and everyone's like, oh, that's Shane. But, if you look at, you can go on Alexa today, and we're bigger than MTV Online. Now they have a TV channel as well, but, if you look at the numbers that Noisy's doing, or if you look at, the numbers that news is going to do as a default of news on YouTube, is you sit there and say, okay, when you're doing, 500 million, video views, then you're not CNN, you're 3 times CNN. And so what CNN did and what MTV did, and Tom Freston, who I did my original deal with for VBS, is now on our board, who was CEO of Viacom. He
did the MTV deal. He built MTV.
He built MTV. When I say we want to be the next MTV, it was the sort of democratization of television brought about by cable allowed MTV to happen. Yeah. And through online and the democratization of, and sort of taking away those, prohibitive barriers of cost, we want to be the MTV, i.e. the sort of the upstart, the challenger, of our generation online, if we already aren't. But now we want to go and take on CNN for news, because every generation has a changing of the guard, and CNN is dying. And we had a great partnership with CNN for years, and but look, they're dying. Their ratings are hurting. They're shrinking, and so and we're growing exponentially. So we're going to try to go after that. Yeah. And on the ESPN side, a lot of what drives our traffic is sports. That just isn't, not the big 3, and we follow sports. And as our Gen Y grows, our sports get bigger than the traditional.
Yeah, so if you're going to grow to that size, how do you scale, but still remain true to what your audience wants?
That's a great question. We always had, so we came up on the magazine model, which is you have a publisher, money, editor, editorial, and then we had a bunch of stringers that you would get to say, okay, you write or you take photos or whatever. So our model now is, okay, we have 4,000 contributors around the world. We have 1,800 employees in 34 offices. But when we want to grow, we just say, okay, we've been working with these 4,000 contributors. If we need more shooters, we know exactly who the best ones are because we've been working with them over the past 5 to 6 years. If we want new cutters, we can get them. If you want, writers, because we actually are working with the majority of them now. They'll work for us and AP and Reuters. But when we want to, we'll just say, okay, we'll bring you on full time. And because the brand is growing so quickly and because people see that, then they'll leave their freelance and come to work for us.
So that's more on the operational side. I'm thinking more on the audience side. You guys appeal to a particular type of millennial, and maybe not all millennials. And how do you grow if you want to be? CNN is going to appeal to what's their audience? 25 to 65 or something like that?
Well, they
maybe
skew
35 or 40 to 65?
No, CNN, if you look at Pew Research, CNN skews at about 61, 62. The big 3 skew at about 63, and Fox skews at 66.
Yeah.
So they're done.
You're just waiting for them to die off.
Yeah. No, but seriously, if you look at Google,
kind of a survival game, though.
If you look at,
we're still in business.
It's riding the wave of the millennial, because you've got the boomers at such a huge audience share that most of the media is focused on right now.
Yeah, or have been forever.
And then you've got the millennials, which is actually by population size bigger.
Yes.
Might not have the spending power. More niche at this time.
Well, they don't have the spending power in dollars per household, but they have the spending power and they actually buy shit. And so what's happened now is this demographic, which is the demographic now, everybody needs to talk to, and they can't, because CNN, for example, although they're trying now, can't retrofit. You can't go to everybody and say, okay, like as Suroosh said, stop having these big, cameras and start shooting on cyber shots. You can't go to these guys and say, let's retrofit this and have younger hosts and that'll do the trick. It just doesn't work. And so I think that, now, and look, it happens in every generation, there's a changing of the guard. Yeah. And so I don't know, we're getting sworn at.
No, we got 15.
But and look, it's happening, and the hardest to talk to demographic, everybody's sort of waking up and saying, how do we do this? And there's not a lot of companies out there that can.
But you can't swear on network TV, or will you be able to swear on network TV in the future?
We swear like.
But you're on specialty.
We're on cable, yeah.
You're on cable, right? Cable and internet, which.
Well, we can swear online.
Yeah, no. I mean, but if you go mass, right? If you go big, if you create this, if the vision plans out the way that it's unfolding, the future of network television or the future of network internet or however your audience is getting it, right? Is going to.
But it's all going to be the same thing, and B, we don't care about network TV because we've been offered networks before because we produce, 2,500 hours of content a year. So if you have a network and it's dying, you come and say, oh, Vice can do it because they have an audience and they have the content, they have the brand, they have the activation, they can do it all. And we said no because, we're primarily an online company and we believe, as goes India, so shall go the world, which sounds funny, but what it means is it's the youngest population in the world. They're all now consuming with 4G, sort of pirated $20 smartphones from China. What does that mean? It means that what happened with the PC is that it became commodified. And the only reason why you buy one PC from another is because of what it has in it, what special services, what bespoke services it has. It's already happened in India where you don't care what phone service it is. It's just what can you give me that I can't get anywhere else. Mm-hmm. And they have Bollywood and they have cricket and they don't have anything else. So we said, okay, we'll provide everything else. So young people are going to be consuming lots and lots and lots and lots of content mobily. And so we sit there and say, okay, great. We did our experiment in India. That's where we're going to go. We're going to go forward. We're not going to go back and say, I got to get a TV network because then I can, win Emmys and get the accolades or whatever. I don't care about that shit. If I do it and it's gravy, and I license and I get lots of money from it, and it's a big ad for my brand, fantastic.
Which is the HBO show.
Yeah.
In reality, but like online, our numbers are bigger than if we had a cable channel. So why are we trying? Why would we even?
They're all getting mad now because they're all TV people out there.
We're going to be on stage with
CBS
later this evening.
That's
so
interesting.
Well, but CBS is interesting. I mean, they're all interesting. I was at this dinner in wherever, and it was all these CEOs of big companies. And I was sitting next to the CEO of a major network, it wasn't CBS, and they said, "Oh, we're margin negative." And I said, "I don't know. What do you mean margin negative?" And they're like, "Well, we don't make money." And you're like, "How can a network that isn't CBS make no money?" They're like, "Well, none of us make any money. I mean, we make money on other things, Univision, this, that, whatever else it is. But we don't make money."
But how do you guys make money? You guys make money primarily through ad impressions online? Is that the...
Well, we make money, not so much anymore. We make money a bunch of different ways. And like Suroosh said, we came up and we had to make money on everything we did. We're incredibly conservative because of that. We had to, we didn't deficit finance anything ever. Mm-hmm. So what we learned, and you touched on it a little bit, is we sort of do vertical and horizontal and vertical, which is in the value chain. We'll do the strategy for the brand, we'll create the assets for the brand, then we'll make the content, then we'll activate around it. So we get paid about 5 times before we even put it online.
Working with the advertisers, not just necessarily selling ad placement inventory.
Well, we'll tell them ads don't work.
If
you just want to take ads, it's not
traditional advertising is there, but we have multiple like old school style show sponsorships are great. Brought to you by Norelco before you watch the thing.
So it's like it's content marketing.
Exactly.
It's one of the terms that they're calling it these
so we
days.
get paid 5 times before it goes online, and then because we're in 34 countries,
you can license it.
we can license to TV, mobile, online, and now it's a great time to be a content creator because there's bidding wars. As goes India, so shall go the world. India, they have auctions for our stuff that actually you know, here we do auctions to go lower and lower on ad sales on things like, you know, Google and YouTube. They're going higher and higher because they have to get your content. They're exclusivity.
When you say
on your
it's
content.
it's the brands that are auctioning it, or who's
the
there?
carriers,
The carriers,
mobile carriers, but you know, online. It's the same thing online. It's the same thing for
So
TV.
you're licensing.
If you have a product that everybody wants, then they'll say, okay, well, I want exclusivity for that, so I'll outbid Vodafone and I'll give you, you know, $5 million. But meanwhile, you're retaining all the IP. You just say, okay, here's your window, and then you go.
Gotcha.
But you've made $5 million in India, then you can sell it for $5 million on to YouTube. You can sell it for $5 million to TV in Holland.
So it's kind of a combination between brand-funded content in multiple different ways, and then you have licensing revenue that comes on top of that as it goes out globally.
Yeah.
And what are the, in terms of the brand-funded stuff, what are the margins around that? Because you'd think from a business mechanics perspective, it's way easier just to sell a 30-second spot, right?
No, it's much more profitable to not. And one of the things that we did.
Why is that? Because each one's custom, though, or is it because your shooters are cheaper? Or?
Suroosh touched on it, which is we were going back to the 1950s of like Only the Shadow Knows, brought to you by Calgon.
Or soap operas.
Yeah, you're going to make Only the Shadow Knows anyway. It's just Calgon or Marlboro, whoever at the time would go in and sponsor it. So we're going to make these shows anyway. It's just different brands can sort of have a perfect fit. But where it really works and where we're really making our cash now is, you know, Intel came to us and said, you know, we want to get close to an arts and creative community. And we actually wanted to create the largest sort of online arts community. And so we started the Creators Project. And they started it as a, you know, they were going to open it up to their OEMs, to all the sort of, you know, HPs and the Dells. And
so all the physical hardware devices,
exactly,
to be able to access it through these physical hardware
exactly,
devices to connect with
exactly,
consumers, young consumers
exactly,
all around the world.
And so they do more market research than any other company in the world. They have 8 algorithmic spiders going anytime on the web. And the only campaign they've ever done in their history that satisfied all 8 globally was the Creators Project. And so because of that, they said, we're not going to do it with OEMs. We'll fund the whole project. They get the lift. They get all the lift. There's no advertising, nothing else. And people are very sophisticated. So if they say, oh, I like Spike Jonze, I got a film by Spike Jonze, and all you see is Intel brought that production credit, they say, that's great, I get it. I understand that. You made my life better. Intel's cool. And they had such a high, they had a lift. They went from 3% positive to 38% positive in the first year, you know, in the quant study. So it was so successful that you know, and that's a lot of money that they give us every year. And
so they're re-upping on an annual basis to create
and doubling
content,
and doubling and doubling
to create
globally.
content for this portal, to create,
exactly,
and it's also live event activations as well.
Yeah,
so it's not just on a screen; it's in physical.
Yeah, our last
locations.
event in Beijing had 250,000 people come to it. So I mean,
that's a big ticket item. That's like on the advertising spectrum, that's about as awesome as it gets.
Because you've got the physical activations, you've got the building
content,
a portal, the content, and then it's renewing that every year to produce more of it.
And because of that now, Samsung, HTC, IBM, all the biggest companies,
they're knocking on the door,
have said we want that exact same thing. So we will have 7 verticals launching this year.
Is why it's more profitable than a 30-second spot.
Because of the scale of it. Mm-hmm. And you guys are handling the activations in terms of producing these events, and that's all done through inside your organization. Is it called Unity? The Virtue. So that's an ad, like a creative shop inside of your media company that handles all of that. So rather than working with creative agencies, you've built that. Or I'm sure you work with some creative agencies, but you built that in-house. We
do everything in-house. Yeah.
Cool. So we have, I think, 10 minutes left, so I just want to make sure if the audience has questions. Oh, yeah, there we go. We've got microphones here, so let's see what the audience has got to say.
So your origin story is awesome. I mean, you want us to all believe you're 2 idiots living in Montreal who just sort of happen
One
to do
idiot.
this thing. Okay, exactly.
No, not him, me. I'm the idiot.
But the amazing thing about Vice, you know, I'm slightly older probably than your demographic, but I would run down to Uncle Otis in Toronto and pick it up as soon as I could. But one thing that changed was when you started to go around the world and see all this shit, whether it's tapping into the rage that's going on in Europe or whatever. And this whole thing sort of fails or succeeds on your ability to develop an editorial voice as it relates to that stuff. And you guys have done this amazing job of being kind of in the middle, right? Like topless feminists versus, neo-Nazis, right? I think you revisited that today, but
yeah.
It's not a rosy portrait of this
Sure.
movement. I mean, you show it warts and all. So at what point did you make this decision about how you were going to approach that editorial voice as it related to hard-hitting journalism? I mean, I see it in your show all the time. I mean, the way you curate your stories clearly suggests a bias, but when you're telling your stories, there's not a huge bias in what you're talking about.
Sure.
It's really an amazing picture of what's going on, which is probably why millennials disconnect from news to begin with, because you've got CNN in the middle, you got Fox way on the right, and you've got MSNBC way on the left, and they're telling you what to think.
Well,
you don't.
You just hit the nail on the head. And the first thing that we are very passionate about is to be non-political, which sounds easy, but now if you look at it, everyone always talks about the liberal media. There's no liberal media. I mean, and not in America and not in a lot of Western Europe, because they're all multi-billion-dollar corporations that are afraid of losing Budweiser as their sponsorship. So they become, I mean, it's not even news anymore. It's just, it's talk radio, it's op-ed crap, and no one was doing stories. They were closing their bureaus to do actual news and just having Riley spout off because was it Riley? Bill Riley.
Bill Riley.
Bill Riley.
Yeah.
O'Reilly.
O'Reilly.
One of them. Just spout off because it's cheaper and it gets the ratings. So we saw that as an opportunity, A. And B, I think our news stuff came out of a show I wanted to do called Where Are All the Adults? Because we were in Beijing and I was shooting a 2-week traffic jam that went all the way to Mongolia. And literally, and it wasn't like a 2-hour traffic jam or a 2-day, it was a 2-week traffic jam. And we were doing the microeconomies that like you had porta potties and then they had, kebabs or whatever, and then you're like, we're a bit close to each other, and the porta potties and the kebab. And, but I remember sitting there going, there's a 2-week traffic jam, yet car companies have to make 3% to 4% more cars a year just to break even. Where are all the adults? Like, do we not see that it's already broken? There's a 2-week traffic jam, we still have to make more cars. And so then it sort of dawned on us that our editorial voice, much like The Economist, is sort of like the guy in the bar who knows everything telling you the story. Our voice is sort of the absurdity of the modern world. Like, this is just crazy. What's happening now with the NSA, and it's crazy what's happening. And you go to countries, we were just talking earlier about China and the real estate bubble in China, or the one-child policy in China. You can go to any country, including Canada, and say, this is just fucking crazy. And so I think that, now Gen Y has been given the bill of the baby boomer spending, and they're sitting there going, okay, now we have to fix this shit. And no one's going out there and just saying, here it is, it's fucked, we have to fix it. And that's what we do.
And you have to do it in an authentic way. I think that's to what you were saying before, the voice, whether it's a piece of content about the arts on the Creators Project. Why that worked for Intel was because we created something that connected with the audience. Now when we're talking about news, you have to be a little more balanced. We have a tendency sometimes to go on our subjective tirades, and maybe that won't work in a kind of mainstream news capacity. But I think the reason why our content has worked was because we weren't that calculated about it when we started. We just literally got the cameras and went, and we were those 2 idiots from Montreal. It was like, how does this camera work? Remember to take the lens cap off, so.
I think we had another, Hampton?
You guys talked about India and China. Can you rank in terms of revenue, where the big country, where the biggest revenue coming from? And also you mentioned Intel. So is the preference going to the bigger brands and do it globally, or do you slice and dice different countries, different brand, and yeah?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, we have a big production office in Beijing. We have 100 edit suites there, but it remains to be seen if we'll get the money out, which is always the hard part. I believe India is a bigger market for us because of mobile, because they do have the youngest population in the world, and it's going straight to 4G. But China will be interesting. It's a fascinating place to be right now, and we're glad that we're there, and we're shooting a lot of stuff there. Well, revenue-wise, America is the biggest, and then EMEA is number 2, and then And then, we put India and China together as Asia. And then Latin America is actually, we do really well in Brazil and really well in, we have our own TV channel in Brazil, our own TV channel in Mexico. So Latin America is doing very well
And
for us.
are you tapping into the global ad budgets and regional ad budgets?
Yeah, so to go to answer that is, Intel will give us a global budget, and then we can go into Spain, for example, and get different sponsors. Or Noisy is a good example of, we have global sponsors, and then we have different sponsors within each country that we're in. So we have both the big global players and then the smaller sort of in-country players.
And you're not necessarily selling on CPM. You might, when you said you had the ad network.
Advice, yeah.
Advice, so that's a CPM sell.
Yeah.
But it sounds like the other sells are selling on activations.
Well, Advice is an interesting, which started as an ad network, but then it's a lot of sort of like-minded, really great sites that were smaller, so they couldn't get the sort of bigger buys. We were partners with WPP, so we could get them money. But then the other thing we started doing is giving them content, and obviously video is the way things are going. Video is expensive to make, so we started giving them video. So we were doing a lot of their content, and we were, driving the revenue. So then we found that, we basically own those sites, and so what we could do is, for example, with HBO or with YouTube, we could activate our own stuff or other people's stuff. And when I say activate, our conversion rates are 18% across the board on Advice versus 0.08% sort of for the rest of the world or for the rest of online.
And conversion rates in terms of clicking on.
Yeah, going to something or doing something, having an action. And so, we realized the reason why they were so successful is because they're actually watching the content and the activations are sort of seamlessly integrated, which is what we learned in the magazine.
Yeah, exactly. There was another question over here. And
Yeah.
one over there. No, we'll get you a mic so other people can hear, and then we'll go with a question back there.
Thanks. I'm just wondering if you've ever thought about doing scripted content, or if you have any interest in doing that.
So I'm leaving here. So the reason why George was so nice and the conference was so nice and rescheduling it is I have to go shoot a big thing once in a lifetime. We have North Korea, where we met Kim Jong-un, premiering this Friday on HBO, and we have a big interview, so that's why I have to run. But after that, I'm going to LA, where we're opening our studio, which we're doing, we're right between the two, I don't know if you know, but YouTube has a new $1 billion+ studio, and we have a studio, and we're doing scripted out of there. We just got funded to do 2 slates of 5 films each, so 10 feature-length films, and then also
online scripted series.
Scripted and so scripted for television. We just got funded by a certain high net worth individual, so that's all coming online as soon as the studio is up and running, which should be by fall. So yes.
Just talk to us. Okay.
Hello, check. Okay. Are they scripted like Daily Show-esque scripted, or are they scripted like something you'd see on any other network?
So we had a lot. It started out because we had a lot of comedians coming to us, and we were gonna do like specials, like 5 camera, 8 camera shoots, and then they said, oh, by the way, I have this scripted show, and because there's less and less sort of there's more and more development and less shows being picked up, that we said, okay, we'll look into it. And we got so many great scripts, and both from sort of unknown, but also from really well-known writers and also talent and stars coming to us saying, I don't even care anymore, I just want to do something fun. Can I do something with you guys and just go wild? And we said, sure. So we actually have a lot of really exciting scripted projects already in development. But now, because that's so exciting, we're opening this studio, which is going to have 5 sound stages and blah 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 blah.
Cool. Yeah, it's great. Always pushing the envelope.
And the beauty is you can just experiment like crazy online.
Yeah.
If it doesn't work, just keep moving. You can spend less in that experimental kind of stage. Just pilot out a bunch of different things and see what works.
Cool. Yeah. Well, guys, honestly, congratulations for the success. Congratulations on the award.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, pleasure.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Nice to be out here.
We'll see you. We'll see you this evening. I think the award show's at 8 o'clock, 7:30.
Perfect.
We'll start working on our speech.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay. Cool.